And I've always called myself the black sheep of the family. And I wear that with pride because where I am now, my perspective, being a black sheep, kind of like it puts it in a different prism and it puts it in a different perspective. And there are things that I know information that I'm not going to argue with someone of depth of theology because it's futile. And someone who reads and can quote scripture, but then I can listen to it and go, you don't understand exactly what is being said, And there was a time whenever I called you up and I said, Scott, what is this? And you said, can you tell me more?
All right. Well, welcome back to the podcast. And for those of you who are watching online, guess what? We've got our next guest. Yeah. So if you saw the title, this is going to pop up as Orion Vale. We're going to explain that here over the course of this podcast. This is probably going to be a two-parter. We'll see what happens. But I'm really excited to introduce you to actually my cousin, Robert Howerton. And we'll explain the Orion Vale momentarily. But I'm excited to have Robert on here because Robert and I are cousins, but truthfully, he's my brother. So, we chase squirrels on the Release podcast, and I'm not going to talk this whole time. I'm going to let Robert jump in. But see, there's this story. When we were kids, Robert had Hot Wheels. Robert had some of the best Hot Wheels you can imagine, and he kept them in this big green bucket. And so we would go to play, and because they were Robert's Hot Wheels, he got to pick out his first for the races across Aunt Janet's linoleum floor. So he would go through and he would pick. And of course, he always got the nicest ones. And then my older sister, she would get to pick next, and she got what he didn't choose. And then that left your boy Scott here with the leftovers. And 9 times out of 10, those leftovers were missing wheels. The paint was gone. The doors were missing. I mean, I got the beaters.
They were properly seasoned and they'd been through there and they survived. And the one thing about that bucket, that was a pickle bucket that Grandpa gave me, and all the Hot Wheels smelled like pickles.
Childhood memories. So yes, I will practice what I preach. I have worked hard on forgiveness. I have forgiven Robert, but I still have to talk about that because, man, there's a scar. It's healed, but there's still a scar.
It happens. I mean, we don't have enough time, but I have enough stories of our childhood that would have your family of listeners snickering and knowing that what we did as kids, no way kids would do that today. But the ones that have been around the block and used to play outside instead of indulging on TikTok or on video games like PlayStation, the authenticity of just pure fun, playful outdoorsiness, we did it.
Yeah,
and if you want to get into it, I can talk about the bike because
we should stop right there.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah,
it might fly out.
We don't want to be, accused of maybe one of our listeners' kids are listening and they get the wrong idea, and then this whole thing gets turned in, and we get politically incorrect. We just get shut down. So we probably should just
politically incorrect. Wow, I guess this is my time.
All right. Enough reminiscing. Here we go. So
here we go.
Yeah. So the reason why I wanted to have Robert on here, there's a couple of reasons. So like I said, Robert and I would say we grew up together, but you guys know the story. There was a season of my life where we were kind of off the reservation. So there was a short season where Robert, my sisters, and I had a lot of time together, and then there was a long season where we didn't. But the reason why this is so timely for Robert to come on is with some of the things that we've talked about in the previous podcast, in more recently talking about, other gods and talking a little bit about the context of the Bible, and then talking about, what it looks like if you've never been, walked in faith. Robert has a pretty cool story. It's not pretty cool. It's freaking awesome. It's a really, really awesome story. And so, Robert, I thought what we would do is if you want to give your version a quick, I don't know, 100,000 foot view, take us from childhood through teenage up to the phone call that you had with me about a year ago now when you said, Scott, I had a dream. Is that a fair question? Can we start there?
I don't know if we have like if this was an extended podcast from the childhood.
You start where you want.
But
Let's do that.
all right. I would say the 100,000 foot view. I was a kid that was considered high energy, and your mother told me a story that don't I remember now because she told me, but I had vague memories, and I'm going to tell that story because I think it's neat, and
Okay.
it helps compound things. Well, I was given a Rubik's cube when I was like 4 or 5, and my uncle was like, "I go, what is this?" It just looked like a box with a cube with colors, and he was like, well, it's a puzzle," and he went, "There you go play with that," and I was like, "What do you do?" "You match the colors." "Okay." I went away and I came back. I think your mom said like maybe 10, 15 minutes later. And I go, "Here you go, Uncle Lloyd. Do you have another one?" And he was like, "What?" And
Right.
so I've been a kid who has always indulged.
Mm-hmm.
I've been known to play video games, and I recognize patterns in video games. And so I would buy a video game and I would play it in a weekend and I would finish it in a weekend. When we were growing up, you would come over, we'd play Nintendo, and
Well, it
you guys would
actually
eventually.
it started with Atari. So you
Yeah.
remember, like we'd come to your house and you had an Atari, and there was like Tank and Pong. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, and so I remember you playing that. It's just like one orange button and a joystick, and you'd just beat every single game, and I'd get so frustrated because I'm like, I can't even get past 30 seconds into it, and I'm dead. And you're like, "Doo, doo, 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 doo." So yeah, I remember that. Started off with Atari, and then yeah, once Nintendo came out, Duck Hunter.
Well, that's what I would do. I would play video games. But in
Uh-huh.
reality, like I would anticipate your arrival. Whenever my mom would say, "Hey, the kids are coming over," they are, I would wait. And it was just I was lonely, and all I would do is focus on things that would occupy my time.
Hmm.
And sometimes I would go with grandpa to the dump, and grandma eventually would say, "Robert, like you, Charles, you're bringing back more crap than you're taking. Like, what are
Hmm.
you doing?" And he's like, "He said he can fix it." And I would pick up things from the junk, and I would be like, "Grandpa, let me try to fix it." "Okay, throw it in the truck." And
Hmm.
so over the course of time, I was a doer. And but I was never like a religious person. I kind of did my own thing. And then like when my mom would say, "Hey, we're going over to a friend's house and you're going to get to play with her son, John." And I was like, "Oh, yes," because they had MTV and I really wanted to watch videos because we didn't have that. Then
Right.
she would, on the way there, she'd be like, "Okay, I want you to behave yourself." I'm like, "I'll be good." "Now we're going to church on Sunday." "No." Oh, because I was so mad. I didn't want to do that. I didn't like being caught and trapped into a pew and
Hmm.
singing songs. So in order to occupy myself in songs, I would I would fart or I would burp or I would just do anything to distract
All
myself.
right.
And that's
Yeah.
what I would do.
Yeah.
And
And part of that though, yeah, it's funny. This is going to be fun to get through. Um,
if we
part of
get through
that
it.
is for our listeners. I had talked a little bit about my dad, but before he changed his life, he was not a good guy, right? And judgmental, and so Robert unfortunately had to experience some of that from my dad. My dad was really hard on Robert. He didn't approve of Robert's mother, and so there's just a lot of bad stuff there. And then so you tie that into him going to church with some of these other friends, but then there was a couple times where he went to church I say that very loosely because it was not a church. It was something completely different, but he went with us there. And so when he said, I'm not religious, his experiences were not great. So I kind of want to throw that out there. Um,
Yeah.
it
And
was, it was,
if I may, talking about your dad, there would be a time when you talk about, before your dad changed, and my uncle, Jim,
hmm hmm
you talk about his name, do you?
yeah,
Oh, um, and there was a time whenever whatever was going on,
hmm
but I would stay for the summer. And
hmm
I would come to stay with grandma, and then I'm like, "Hey, can I go over to the Scott and can I stay with them for a week?" And she's like, "Whatever you want to do, honey." So she'd drop me off at your house. I would hang out, but then when your dad would come home, whoever your listeners are, they're going to be like, "This is the like, what is he, a troll?" Because what I'm about to say,
right,
he came in, and then I was like, and it was so quiet. You were quiet, your sisters were quiet, and my aunt was quiet, and I was like, "Are we playing a game?"
right.
And then at that time, I didn't know. And then looked at me and you were like, and then I was like, so, this looks good. And then Uncle Jim goes, and I was like, hmm. So he grunted, and then I grunted back because I still wasn't sure. I didn't know that there was no talking at dinner. And so at that point, I was like, well, let's spice this place up. So I leaned over and went, "Oh." And then Jim, he slams his hands down. My aunt is like, she's holding it back. She
Right.
wants to laugh, but she's holding everything back. She's on the praise Jesus. She doesn't lose it. And then you were like, and then your sister Siobhan, she's snickering. And then Jim says, we'll deal with this later. And he goes in the other room and eats his dinner. And
Yeah.
then at that point, your mom says, it's fine. And then I'm like, can we talk now? And everything was normal. Like, do you
Yeah.
remember that?
I do. I do. Yeah. Yeah.
And so that is how I have been. And I've always called myself the black sheep of the family.
hmm
And I wear that with pride because where I am now, my perspective, being a black sheep kind of like it puts it in a different prism and it puts it in a different perspective. And there are things that I know information that I'm not going to argue with someone of depth of theology
hmm
because it's futile. And someone who reads and can quote scripture, but then I can listen to it and go, huh, you don't understand exactly what is being said,
hmm
And there was a time whenever I called you up and I said, Scott, what is this? And you said, um, Tanya, can you tell me more? And I'm like, I'm getting these weird, I'm going to call them downloads. And then I also said, like, hey, before I told you about the downloads, I'm like, Scott, I'm getting this weird dream. And you said, oh, okay, what is it? Um, you want to share? But before I told you about it, I told my wife and I was like, babe, I'm having the strangest dream. And she said, well, do you want to share? And I'm like, yeah, it is it's full of darkness. And then it is a door, but the door, I can't see what the person is. And it's just looking at me.
So
And,
I'm
yep.
just going to interrupt you because, like, this is where this conversation is really going to like get some jet fuel. We're going to take off, but if I can, I just want to fill in just a few little pieces for our listeners
Yeah.
before you get there. Um, so we talked about how Robert's experience with religion, church was not great, and so a lot of years went by. Robert you're ridiculous with technology, computers, IT. You've been in that world. You've done a lot of things. You've gone to the very top of what you can do as an IT professional. Um, there was a lot of things about your life, and I'll let you touch on these if you want to, but I just kind of want to bring us up to this point about this dream for our listeners, because you're like, I don't want nothing to do with Jesus. I don't want nothing to do with the Bible. I don't want nothing to do with church. I'm going to do everything I want to do. And then whenever I do everything I want to do and I retire and I'm an old fart like grandpa, then I'll do the Jesus thing. Like, is that pretty
That is
accurate?
true. I did
Yeah.
say that.
So like you were so far away and you've had a lot of, I would say, bad experiences with Christians, people who would say that they're Christians. And so from your perspective outside looking in, having you went to church 4 or 5 times in your life, 6 maybe, so not very many.
Four
I
times, I would say total. One to help you because of some bullying, and you're
Mhm.
like, hey, and I don't think you ever told your mom until later, but you came to me and you said, hey, I want you to go to church with me. And I was like, ugh, why? I don't want to do that.
Right.
And
Right.
then you said, because there's there's two dudes that are just, I just need some backup.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's me at the core. That's like,
Mhm.
I
You're right.
will, if someone says, hey, I need your help, they've got me like deadlocked in. I'm like, if someone said, hey, I'm going to need you to be here at midnight with a bottle of Jack Daniels and a shovel and some lime, and I don't want you to say anything. Okay, I
So-
have one question. Whose car are we taking?
yeah, right. Right. No, it's funny, but that is like, I'm glad you brought that up, because that is like, for even the years that Robert and I were apart, our relationship is a divine relationship, because my relationship with Robert is, there were times when we would go a year without talking, or a year and a half, and it's not because we were mad at each other. I was still lost in my life, my pose, my career, all my stuff. Robert's following his career, he's chasing his dreams. But we would go a long time without talking, but as soon as we had talked, it was like we picked up right where we left off.
Hmm.
But Robert has always been generous. He's always been so much fun, the life of the party. Um, he was not your stereotypical IT guy, because he's really cool. No offense to IT guys. I'm not bashing you, but it's just like, Robert has always been someone that I looked up to. But then there was this intersection in our lives. I've told y'all 11 years ago now, whenever um, like Jesus just absolutely captured my heart, it took me down a different road. And there was so much about that I wanted to share with Robert. But from his position, it just like, no thanks. I'm not interested in the Jesus stuff. And so I tried to share with him a few times, not share the gospel, just like what's going on in Scott's life. Um, and so he was always kind to me when I would share, but he was like, hey, don't need to go too far. Right. Fair enough. Is that a
That's
fair
true.
statement?
It
Yeah.
is fair. And I will say one time, like Scott and I, we would travel to vacations together.
Hmm.
And so we were sitting at N- New Mexico at Red River. We just ordered two big frosty beers.
We
And
did.
then as I'm taking the sip, Scott says, hey, man, I've kind of joined this new group. And, one of these days, I'd really love for you to join me. Like, it's not really churchy, but I really think you'd like it. And I just took a sip and I said, Scott, you keep that Bible bullcrap to yourself and enjoy your beer.
Touche. That's exactly what happened. Right. It's awesome. So yeah, that has kind of been our relationship. And, we would talk most of the time. We were catching up on his life, marriage. He was with me when I was going through my divorce. So we've done life together, but there was these two pieces of our lives that we really never could share. So I hope that's proper background. So now back to the
It
download.
is. And the download, before I get to that, I should share with you and whomever is listening that when you talk about I got into the tip of the career, I did make it to a chief officer position, and where at the time the person who I reported to, he was he. I would say he put me in a time to where I didn't know who I was. The way he would communicate to me in a non-professional, it was so alarming and so shocking that I didn't know how to handle it.
Mm-hmm.
But then it broke me. It broke me in a way to where I got depressed. I thought this is not, I don't know who I am anymore. And then when I got to the deepest, which I call it the dark night of the soul, and I
Mm-hmm.
shared with you that, Scott, I I think I've died. And you were like, oof, share when you're ready. I'm here to listen because you've always been an excellent listener. So if in context of this online and very vulnerable thing that I'm doing right now, which I'm used to it now, I'm okay. Because how the book came along is I was harboring things that no one knew,
Mm-hmm.
that only I knew. And when I went through the dark night of the soul, I started like having these strange feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And then I don't read the Bible. I don't do any of that stuff. But I also started asking you questions and I said, "Hey, Scott, like I've been I've had this dream and the dream I talked to Kiona and the dream was a door and it was like I woke up and I've remembered everything about the dream. But the
Mm-hmm.
dream was happening at 3:17 a.m. It happened on one night, it happened on the next night, and it was consistent. And then eventually, after 10 nights of the same dream, I was like, honey, I've been having this weird dream. And she
Right.
said, okay, well, what is it about? And I said, I honestly don't know. It's just some dude, and maybe it's a girl. I don't know. It's just a shape. And then, do you talk to it? And I was like, well, I didn't at first, but now I am.
Right.
What did it, what did you say? And I go, I didn't say anything. I was just listening. What did it say? Tell your story. What story?
Mm-hmm.
And then and then from there it's like tell your story. And then I was like, what in the wild world sports is this Thor figure talking about? And then I was like, I think I get it. And then my wife was like, what is it? And I go, I think I'm supposed to write a book.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, what? I said, yeah. She's like, all right, write a book. You've done a lot of other things. Let her
Right.
rip. And I'm like, yeah, I think I'm going to write a book. Or at least start a story.
Mm-hmm.
And then she was like, what's the book about? I was like, I don't know. I'm just going to let her rip. And then, so then I started on my phone. I was just, I'd wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I would be like, pump, okay,
Mm-hmm.
um, here we go. And then as I started going on it, I ended up typing like the, the watchers.
Mm-hmm.
And then you said, can you talk? And I'm like, yeah. I'm sitting here in Lockhart, Texas, so yeah, I can talk. And I was like, you said, where did you come up with that? I don't know, it just came to me.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm, okay. I was like, why? Just keep going. And then I wrote another chapter on my phone and sent you a text. And then eventually I sent it to your sister and she's like, I sent it. But I asked your mom when she came to visit and I was like, hey, I have a story.
Mm-hmm.
And I've kind of sent some to your son, to Scott, and then your little sister was like, I go, here's the premise, and they were like, I like it. I think you should go for it. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do it. And then as the story came along, um, eventually you said, Robert, you got to be honest with me. Like, have you ever heard of the Book of Enoch? And I said, no, never heard of it. Like, do you like? You got it. Like, you're being. I'm like, yeah, I will swear on my mother's soul, who
Mm-hmm.
she passed away in 1999. I've never read it.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, goodness gracious. Like, wow. And then I kept getting more. And then eventually that person, I got to like a dialogue, and then the books just started being written, and there's pieces of it like I I do scripture in it, but I can tell you I've never read the Bible, but
Mm-hmm.
I invert scripture in it because of the story of how it is, and the story is called the Bloodline Watchers, and the
Mm-hmm.
whole premise of the book is the first one's called The Awakening, the second one is called The Covenant, which is released 8/13
Mm-hmm.
of this year.
Yeah.
The third one will be the Convergence, and the fourth one will be called The Rapture, and it is about a frequency in your life. Like, we are all a divine spark, but the story is about a spiritual war that's bleeding into the physical world. And while I was writing this thing, I was like, Scott, I have a question. And you're like, hit me. I'm like, I was told to read the Gospel of Thomas. And you were like, that is really obscure, but you can find it. It's like, I go, have you
Yeah.
read it? Nope, I've not read it. So I read
Yeah.
it, and then I got through it, and it's kind of short, and I was like, I understand everything he's talking about.
Uh-huh.
Like, understand it. And I also realized that now I'm surrounded by so many people that I don't judge them, but Christians do judge others. They
Mm-hmm.
do.
Oh, they
And
do.
I also recognize that I'm not drunk on the wine. I am unfiltered.
Yeah, you're a blank canvas because you haven't been raised in religion. So,
Yeah.
if it's fair, I'm looking at the clock, so this is definitely going to be a two-parter. Um, what I would like to do is I want to take you back to the first phone call that I remember with you. I want you to touch on that, because I'm going to kind of, if I can, I'm going to lead you to a cliffhanger for part two. You had called me. I was at work and you called me and you're like, Scott, I've been having these dreams.
Yeah.
And and you told me that you had this door and there was light around the crack in the door, but the door was closed. And
Hmm.
you'd been having that. If I'm recalling this correctly, if I'm not, you correct me. It's what I remember from our conversation. And so you'd been seeing this door for multiple dreams, and then the door opens, and you met someone, and you were asked to choose two colors. So, do you remember that conversation, and can you elaborate
I
on that for me
do.
a little bit?
Um, yes. Now, when that happened, I uh I indulged. I had yeah, I did. I had about 20 milligrams of the finest doobie gummy that they
Right, right.
and so at that point there was and you asked me like, why do you do that? And I'm like, because I'm told to do it. And they're like, what? And then I realize now, like, looking back, the doobie, there's two sides of this coin, and I understand this perspective now. Like, alcohol, for example, is a depressant, and when you drink it, what is alcohol called? A spirit. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes when people drink too much alcohol, they will black out
Mm-hmm.
and they will do things they don't recall. And then, but when you take, you know, an herb
Mm-hmm.
and you take something in, and at the point in time when this was happening, I was pretty depressed, and I was still trying to fight through the dark night of the soul.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
at the point in time for me, and now I don't need anything like that because I know what to listen for when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to the frequency. And from there, it was a conduit. It made the transition, the information for me faster because my conscious mind was putting so many layers and so many barriers of how I was raised and a lot of my childhood trauma. It was blocking the signal, as I
Mm-hmm.
like to call it. But
Right.
when I took a 5 milligram, I started to relax. And then after I'm like, take another one, then all of a sudden, whoop.
Right.
What is happening around me
Yeah.
where I'm not seeing like entities, I'm seeing lines, like
Mhm.
lines of, not lines of code, but like lines, like signal lines. I'm just like,
Yeah.
I look at my hands and I'm like, why are
So
my hands glowing?
yeah. So here's what we're at 30 minutes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of lead this to a cliffhanger, and that's how we're going to pick up on part 2. For our listeners, you just heard him saying that he was using THC. Don't check out. Like, seriously, don't check out when you heard that. Okay. This is part of the story. It is. And I'm going to talk about that. But you were given the choice between light and dark.
Correct.
And this person that came to you, you later said, Scott, I met this guy and he told me his name. And it's funny because you said it kind of sounds Hawaiian.
Yeah.
What was, and you said, you tried to say it. Do you remember how you pronounced it?
Yeshua.
Yeshua. And I said, Yeshua. And I said, spell it for me. So spell his name.
Yeshua.
You met Yeshua. And we'll see you on part 2.